Thank you. Now, I think I have a good idea of what the opposition is going to say. And the reason I think that is because globalists tend to have a favorite argument that they always go back to. If you're the kind of masochist who watches Davos speeches, you'll hear it again and again. They're going to say that since 1990, since the fall of the Soviet Union, in the era of free trade and globalization, global poverty has been reduced by over a half. They will say that thanks to globalization, more than 1 billion people have been taken out of extreme poverty since 1990. Now, in one regard, that's true. It is true that more than 1 billion people have been taken out of extreme poverty since 1990. But you're all students. If you're studying science or the social science, you'll know that correlation doesn't equal causation. So it may be true that there was a massive fall in extreme poverty during the era of globalization, but was it because of globalization? I say it isn't. And if you take a deeper look at the statistics, I think you'll agree with me. If you look at numbers from the World Bank, you'll find that most of the reduction in absolute poverty since 1990 occurred in just 2 regions, Asia and Southeast Asia. And in those 2 regions, 2 countries, just 2, drove most of the fall. And those were India and China. In the past 4 decades, India and China have taken more of their citizens out of extreme poverty than any other. But here's something the globalists won't tell you. During that period, during that fall in absolute poverty, China and India maintained some of the highest trade tariffs in the world. China's tariffs in the 1990s had tariffs of over 20%, and in some cases as high as 40%. India entered the 1990s with average tariffs of over 50%, and those didn't drop below 20% until 2008. For comparison, American and British tariffs during the same period didn't rise higher than 7%. So what do we have to thank for the massive fall in global poverty? Is it free trade, globalization, or is it India and China with their protectionist trade policies? I would say it's India and China, clearly. By the way, I would like to hear the opposition make the argument that China is an example of globalization success. You know, China with its trade tariffs, with its currency manipulation, with its state-supported industries. It doesn't sound like a globalist country to me. So what has globalism done for us here in the West? So capital is flowing across borders, investment is flowing into the country. That's globalization, right? That's what we hear about. I mean, let's be honest, most of the investment is going to London, but you know, that's still the country. We're still benefiting from that, right? Haven't you been to London? Haven't you seen all the high-rise luxury apartments that are being built? That's the product of global investment flowing into the country. Britain is open, like a 24-hour supermarket. It's open. And we're getting all this investment, all these nice new apartment buildings. Well, yes, except that nobody can afford to live in them. In fact, last year alone, 22,000 homes in London were vacant for 6 months or more. The investors who buy them aren't actually living in them, they're buying them as investment assets because they know the prices will keep on spiking. So the free flow of capital and labor across borders has mainly gotten us empty factories in the north and empty houses in London. Yay, globalism. What else has globalism gotten us? Gender equality. Again, if you watch Davos speeches, and I don't know why you would, you'll hear much talk about the need for global gender equality. You'll hear people from Goldman Sachs and the International Monetary Fund drone on and on about the need to get more women in the workforce around the world. This is a big priority. Why do bankers care so much about gender equality? What do they gain from it? I wonder. I recently read a report from S&P Global, one of the top global financial firms. It was called Women at Work, the Key to Global Growth. This report said that even a modest increase in the labor force participation of women would add over $500 billion to the American GDP over the next 10 years. 500 billion. That's so much GDP. It also said that if British women had joined the labour force at the same rate as Norway, the economy would be 8% larger. 8%. That's another huge, massive increase in the GDP. It's very important. You have to care about the GDP, guys. That's GDP. It's the most important thing, right? However, there's a big problem stopping this huge GDP boost that we all need, that we're all told we need so much. The S&P report says that women are being held back from joining the workforce due to social attitudes to familial obligations. Familial obligations. Oh dear. The report cited research saying that 39% of American mothers had at one time or another taken time off work to care for a child or another family member. Unbelievable. Taking time off work to care for your families when they could be contributing to GDP? Why would you do that? How dare they? Someone has to stop them. You've got to stop all this families nonsense as well. You can't make short-term corporate profits out of families, guys. The key to personal liberation, actually, is hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and then 10 hours a day in a cubicle for the rest of your life. That's freedom. It's equality. It's what the globalists want. I mean, yes, we won't have any future as a species because we won't be making families and reproducing, but the GDP will go up. That's the important thing. In fact, when you start looking at the ideology of globalization, you'll see GDP really seems to be the most important thing. You know, exporting jobs to sweatshops in Asia, that's globalization, the globalization of labor. It means wages will go down over here, jobs will be lost over here, but corporate profits will go up, which means the GDP will go up. So everything's going great. Mass immigration, undocumented workers, well, that involves millions of poor people being incentivized to put themselves at the mercy of people traffickers, making risky voyages across the Mediterranean in rafts. But we'll get cheap labor. The GDP will go up. It's all great. Transnational bodies like the European Union making free trade easier. Well, you'll lose your political sovereignty, your national identity, your national pride, but the GDP will go up. That was the big globalist argument during Brexit. Worked very well. So, if you think the GDP is the most important thing in politics, then by all means support the opposition. But if you think there are other things that matter, like families, national identity, stable society with stable wages and jobs, then vote aye. Thank you.